The Twins reportedly are in the market for a backup shortstop. Could be a free agent, could be a trade, because whoever they have probably ain't in the organization yet. Find out what's next by getting Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Locked On Twins, your daily go-to source for the top Minnesota Twins insight, discourse, and analysis. Personally, it's my favorite show of the Locked On Podcast Network, which, by the way, brings you your team every day. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe where applicable. I'm Dave Brown, an MLB writer for too long, a BBWAA member for over a decade, and a Baseball Hall of Fame voter who is currently based in the Midwest. I remind you, there's no smoking in the Metrodome, but there is a giant gallon of milk if you'd like to partake. Across the Great Plains and cyberspace, we have Brandon Warren, my co-host, a longtime Twins writer and even longer time Twins fan who knows how to ask the really tough questions of players like Lance Lynn and others. Today's show is going to examine who will play shortstop for the Twins when Carlos Correa doesn't. We'll look at who's on the 40-man roster, or even deeper in the organization, who's still available in free agency, and who they could trade for at some point. We'll also say so long to officially to Michael Hellman. We'll check in on the Twins announced opening day starter and review a Joe Mauer Super Bowl commercial. What? But before we get into details, you need to know also that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So download the app and head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel. We're going to bring in Brandon Warren. Brandon, how you doing? How was your Super Bowl?
Good. Had a few people over and we made some meatballs and some dip and some little smokies and vegetable plate, all kinds of fun stuff. And then just enjoyed the game with young children. Everybody kind of got out of the house about halftime. We watched the halftime show, went up, got kids ready for bed, and got to see the end of it. But in general, yeah, really nice little Sunday night. I can't complain.
Our kids, well, they were rooting for the Chiefs, so that was kind of an unhappy time. But we did have we made homemade sliders and homemade nuggets, and the kids liked that. And I think the kids liked they were singing along anyway with the Kendrick Lamar halftime show, so they appreciated it. I don't know if they thought it was his best performance, but they thought it was good enough.
Did your sliders have any mustard?
You know, my daughter puts mustard on her burgers. I'm over the mustard phase on my burgers, so I'm a ketchup man myself.
No, I'm both, but yeah, we respect.
And sometimes mayo or a mayo derivative.
Mm-hmm.
So this show, we're going to talk about who's playing shortstop for the Twins if Carlos Correa doesn't. There's reports out there that they're interested in a shortstop. And, you know, looking over the Twins roster, the potential 26-man, the 40-man, who's in the minor leagues, the organization kind of lacks shortstops. I look at who they have, and they don't have – I don't want to say they don't have anybody, but if you look at, like, if the season began tomorrow, who would play shortstop if Carlos Correa doesn't? I would be worried about this. I guess the answer is Willie Castro, but as Dan pointed out in his The Athletic piece, Mr. Dan Hayes, Willie Castro, this is his he's a -9, I think, on defensive runs saved over at Fielding Bible. His numbers, again, this is another contradiction. His numbers did not seem that bad on the MLB site at Savant at StatCast, but his numbers definitely were not good on defense at short. So Willie Castro is like the first guy. If you look at some of the other guys, Royce Lewis, no longer a shortstop, really. He was at one time, but we don't want to see that. Brooks Lee probably should not be a shortstop. He played that a little bit last year. I would say that was his least impressive. I mean, he didn't hit well, but I think his defense at short was unimpressive.
Yeah,
and much better at third and second. Peyton Eels, Keith Law. I just listened to Keith Law on this. Keith Law says Peyton Eels is a second baseman. Luke Keeschel is not a shortstop either. He can play middle infield, kind of the same as Peyton Neals.
Right.
That's not a lot of depth at shortstop. I mean, I think maybe I don't know if Great Trade Falvey has been hamstrung by the budgetary restrictions, but the way I would have done it is I would have had a guy already. But now we're down to the dregs and free agency, and that's not so good, Al.
Well, I mean, like, I wonder if, knowing what they know about the value of the contract and what they would end up needing, do you think they bring back Kyle Farmer instead of letting him go to the Rockies?
Yeah, I don't. You know what? I didn't look up Kyle Farmer's numbers as short, but I don't remember them being particularly good. I think
No, and maybe not, but at the same time, too, and we'll look at the list of guys who are available, because I did write a piece for Puckett's Pond before the weekend. And it's, I mean, at this point in the offseason, you kind of get what you expect. There's, some veteran guys there that can play, but it's not exciting options for sure.
No, it's not. We're sure, we're pretty sure. Are you in agreement that the person is not the ideal backup for Correa is not in the organization?
Well, I think the value of Willie Castro is, yeah, he can play shortstop, but if you need a backup for Carlos Correa and you need someone if he gets hurt, that's two different things. It's more along the lines of how do you protect yourself in the event that he misses 2 weeks or something like that. And Willie Castro's value is that he can play everywhere. Rocco prefers that he can play everywhere, but that means that on any given day, is he available to you to play everywhere? When you have him shoehorned in one spot, that doesn't mean he can't give you value there, but it takes away his inherent overall overarching value. So I would agree. Yeah, I think they have to have somebody from the outside come in and play short, because it's not going to be anybody you mentioned. I mean, they could put Royce there. I don't think it'd be pretty. I mean, it might be okay. Brooks, none of those guys really do much for me, if I'm completely honest.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't see Brooks play a lot of short last year, but just based on the scouting reports and the data that we do have, that doesn't seem like a something that you want to go with long term. I mean, yeah, they have guys that for a game or two you could put in a short, but you know how they've gone out and added Harrison Bader in center field, basically as Buxton insurance, and he does other things too. You could put him at corner, outfield. He'll probably start a bunch of games in left field as well when Buxton plays center too. I think you'll see them out there a lot together. But they don't have a player like that in case something bad happens with Correa. So we are kind of relying on Correa getting a handle on his plantar fasciitis. I think he's had it in each foot now the past 2 years. They really can't afford to have that happen again. But even building in an optimistic season for Correa, playing, let's say 140 games, that's still a non-insignificant portion of the season that, you're going to want to have somebody who's capable of playing shortstop. And, Castro short is not his best position. Rocco does like to have him move around. And we've also heard that he's, in play for first base, which scares me a little bit on a couple different levels. I think maybe we're sort of assuming he can play first base. I mean, if you can kind of play shortstop and play center field, supposedly you can play first. I think that's some of it, but that's not a position where he has a lot of experience. So it's, getting back to the minor leaguers, Keeschel, not a shortstop. Peyton Neals, probably not a shortstop. And, we're talking about those are two guys, while Keeschel is a good prospect, and Peyton Neals certainly gives off good vibes at AAA after his, being in the independent league. That's not really what you want to rest your hat on. I think it's there are a couple guys who I've kind of talked myself into as they would be good dudes to have around. If you want it, Luis Arias is one, and
not to be confused with Luis, not to be confused with Luis Urias.
Right,
Luis Urias.
It's
Urias.
It's not. It's Urias, not Arias, and not David Arias, and it's not Luis Urias either. So
nice trade, Falvey.
Yeah, we want to get that right. Luis Urias, his brother Ramon, has been with the Orioles and other places. The problem I see with Urias is that he didn't play shortstop last year.
Yeah.
The past 2 seasons, I don't think he's played shortstop. The
You know
last
what we should do?
information we got on him at short is that he was what?
Oh no, I was gonna say we should unpack. We should do our first break and then unpack this a little more because then we can do it unabated.
All right,
Are you okay with that? Huh?
I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, I just we want to give some love to the sponsors, and that way we can run like wild horses after we give some love to.
Catch my breath then.
Yeah, here you go. When the game tips off, we're not talking about the big game anymore. Now that that's in our rearview mirror, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I, for one, Dave, have gotten way more into the NBA this year than in previous years and have definitely enjoyed it. With FanDuel, by the way, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, say you really believe someone's got something cooking, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets in a same game parlay. Personally, I like watching games and kind of keeping tabs with them. And I like to have a little extra juice while I'm watching. And I'm not talking about juicy juice. I'm not talking about a beverage. I'm talking about looking at what I think is going to happen and maybe putting down a little coin. The app, by the way, is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly because right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Back with Locked On Twins, talking about potential backups for Carlos Correa, and not just necessarily one game, but maybe a couple weeks if he has to go on the injured list again. And the 2 prominent names mentioned in Dan Hayes' article, Luis Urias and Paul DeJong. Urias didn't play shortstop, though, the past 2 seasons. The last data we have on him is neutral or maybe a little bit better at the position. He's had good seasons offensively, some pretty decent seasons. And maybe the reason that he hasn't played shortstop the last 2 years is because he was on teams that didn't really require it.
Right.
I know J.P. Crawford he was in Seattle, and J.P. Crawford pretty much has that job every day. Mm-hmm. And so there really wasn't a need for him to play shortstop. So I hope that that's the reason that he didn't play short. And it's not that, they've kind of looked at him in practices and workouts and said, well, his range is gone. So we should not let him play shortstop, because I've kind of talked myself into him, Luis Urias, being a decent, at least as good as Farmer kind of bench dude. And, I don't know if he can, if he's got any summer sausage on him, but I think he'd be okay. I think he's probably, to me, if he can still play short, preferable to DeJong. Do you have an opinion?
Well, so I wrote him up for, like I said, Puckett's Pond, and I think I actually talked myself into him more than out of him. And it was more along the lines of he's 27, won't be 28 until June, and does have a couple 3-win seasons in his career. If you look at Baseball Reference WAR, hits lefties. But I'm a young guy who, even when he struggled last year, hitting a $191, had a 105 OPS plus, and it wasn't that many plate appearances. It's just kind of a weird year for him. And Seattle's not exactly like rescue a guy from Colorado level of rehabilitation, but I feel like going to Seattle has messed up some guys in recent years. I don't know, Ty France, another free agent the Twins could look at. They need some help at first base, and maybe he's an option. But I went into writing thinking that Paul DeJong would be who I would come away with thinking they should have. And the prototype of what the Twins could use is someone who can play shortstop every day but doesn't have to. Like if you get Paul DeJong and he plays a little bit of third base, which he did with the Royals, because obviously they have Bobby Witt Jr., you're okay with that. And if you just get him and he plays 20 games and that's it, yeah, it stinks for him. but it also means you had a healthy Carlos Correa, a healthy Royce Lewis, a healthy whoever at second base. So the prototype of a big league capable player who will fit however you want a player to fit, won't be stretched too much if they do end up playing every day just by sheer happenstance. That's kind of the prototype I think he would fill. With Urias, or I always do it wrong. Urias, he gives you the most of a ceiling. There might be something there where you have a nice, maybe obviously not everyday shortstop, but if he hits lefties as he has in his career and can move around a little bit, Kyle Farmer had a role on this team doing that, and at times not doing that, but still being on the team. So I think those are the two I kind of hone in on. And I don't know if you had planned on coming up with this name either, because I kind of feel like it's predestined to where he'll end up. But Jose Iglesias is still out there too.
Is he predestined to end up at church?
Well, I think he's going to go back. I feel like he's going to go back to the Mets, but I don't know why it hasn't happened yet.
Oh my God. Yeah, I don't know.
Because he was really good last year. I mean, he was worth 3.1 Baseball Reference WAR in 85 games. I mean, you're talking just a hair under 6 wins if you play 162 games. And obviously, for a glove first prospect, he's turned into a pretty respectable hitter. And over his career, he's been kind of up and down, but he's always managed to stay above truly terrible. And that's where, he's been around. He still, I think, can flash the glove a bit. Probably a pretty good vibes guy if he's still playing at this age and with this many different teams, but I can't say that for sure. I don't know. I mean, that's another option to think about.
Yeah, he was a good vibes guy last year. The
right.
Mets had, catchphrases like once a week, and he was responsible for one of them.
Maybe Harrison Bader can talk to him.
Maybe. Yeah,
gives me a little bit of like a Juan Castro back in the day vibe, like veteran shortstop, or like an Alex Gonzalez. Probably the idea of them is more solid than the actual player over the course of a full season. But baseball men like their old, safe shortstops.
I think if you look at his offense, it isn't when he doesn't hit well. I think he's he's still in the range of DeYoung as far as what DeYoung is typically. DeYoung is for a guy that hits some home runs is usually maybe 5 to 10% below average hitter. He's in the 90s on the WRC plus or the OPS plus, and that's I think Iglesias ends up there, maybe a little bit lower in some seasons. So that's a guy who's got a good defensive reputation. DeYoung had a good defensive reputation until last year.
Yeah.
He didn't play shortstop with the Royals once they traded. He played. They put him at third, but where he was okay for a while. Then he lost his job and didn't really get it back. So he's had a very weird career. He signed an extension really early, and then ever since then with the Cardinals, he struggled to lead up to.
Wasn't he one of those guys that had eye surgery and they were like, oh, maybe the eyes were the issue or something like? I want to say he was one of those LASIK guys or something.
That could be, but at some point he stopped hitting, and last year he stopped playing defense at short. So,
and depending on your preference, I mean, if you want empty-ish batting average, someone in bat ninth and hit 280 with little OBP or little power, that's Iglesias. And in this lineup, if you hit ninth and you're on base, even just 320 and you hit 280, I mean 280 nowadays, pretty dang good batting average. And again, batting average has its limitations, but when you're a singles only guy, it does paint a story where he could score a bunch of runs at shortstop as a second shortstop or backup guy across the board. Just by sheerly being on base when guys like Royce Lewis, Carlos Correa, Byron Buxton come to the plate. I don't know. I mean, I think that could be a sneaky signing. I would be fine with the idea of any of those three, but I think Iglesias is the one that I've thought the least about, but would probably be the most okay with.
He's an interesting option. Don't expect him to be 30 or 40% better hitter than the league.
He's gonna. I still think he's going to be a Met. I really do.
I am not sure where the Mets are as far as their imaginary salary cap or whatever Steve Cohen has going, or their 40-man roster. So I don't know like why he wouldn't have signed yet, but I don't know if he's holding out for more cash or whatever. But there are a couple of guys. These are needles and haystacks. I almost find, but if the Twins were to trade for somebody, I have three names. They're not really exciting names. Otto Lopez is one. He's kind of projected to be the Marlins starter at second, but he's got time at short. The Marlins are always changing what they're doing. I could see at some point really early, and he's a guy that they got on waivers at one point. That's somebody who could be available, and maybe that you could put it at short.
Surprisingly good last year too. He and Xavier Edwards, man. 2.6 Baseball Reference WAR, and I bet a lot of people don't even know who Otto Lopez is.
Yeah, Xavier Edwards could be an all-star type this year if he continues his pivot to goodness. And that could ultimately, with whatever prospects they have on the way in Marlins land, could make Lopez available. So there's him. Ernie Clement was surprisingly good at shortstop. He's a guy who's been kind of a middle infield and sometimes it seems like outfield type, whether with the Guardians or the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays right now fancy themselves contenders, and actually, in the AL East, I don't think that's unreasonable. I don't see anybody except the Yankees being a definitive, yes or no on that. Well, I guess the Orioles too, but I could see the Blue Jays having a better season than the Red Sox, or I could see them possibly contending for a while. So I don't know if Ernie Clement would be available. I think he would be really good.
Well,
That's a guy that you could put there for a couple weeks and be okay.
His numbers though are like cut from the Paul DeYoung cloth too. But if you have defense, that's the difference. And he's also played everywhere too.
Another funny name would be Isaiah Kiner Falefa from the Pirates, who's a Twin for about 10 seconds a couple off seasons ago. And he's going to be starting for them, but the Pirates they have to have prospects on the way, right? But Isaiah Kiner Falefa would be a decent glove at shortstop who has shown an ability at times for weeks at a time to hit pretty well. That would be a guy who I would, if we're putting all these guys together, I'd have Isaiah on top. And I'm very curious about Urias as to, can he still play shortstop?
If you think he can play short, he's a really nice pickup.
If we think he can play shortstop, that's the guy. And I might even be willing. The Twins have second baseman coming out of their ears, not necessarily third baseman. So they wouldn't need him for that, but maybe they could put him over at third sometimes and just kind of make it worth it there. Based on the organizational depth, one of these people needs to come to the Twins soon because they don't have anybody else. It is I don't know what to call it dire, but they don't have anybody ready, to play shortstop.
And I also had Kike Hernandez on my list. He's back at the Dodgers. Brendan Rodgers does not play shortstop anymore, but is fascinating. I also want to see what he looks like away from Colorado. So I just wanted to throw those names out there as names I looked at as well. If the Twins needed more help at second base, and they need help at second base, but they don't need more average help at second base.
No, they need somebody who's clear cut, maybe above what they have.
Or they just need to have what they have. Yeah. But if I were to power rank these guys, man, Iglesias would be pretty high again, just because I think a veteran vibes guy would go pretty far on this team. But he also really didn't play it that much short last year. He was second and third. So that doesn't, you got to be sure he can play short, and he's not particularly young. He's entering age 35 season. I think Urias is the guy here. IKF, I think, is also a good vibes guy, can play all over, has won a Gold Glove at third base, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's right.
Yeah. So I mean, he's even caught a little bit, or quite a bit actually. And then, I mean, DeYoung to me is like the least exciting, but if it happens, I'll be like, all right, it's a guy you put in the 9-hole when he's playing, and maybe he'll pop a couple homers for you and maybe one in a big spot. He's like the Michael A. Taylor of shortstops, but if Michael A. Taylor stops playing center field, he's pretty much out of the league. And DeYoung, if he can't hang it short, is again pretty much out of the league.
Sometimes with defensive metrics, you can even you have a partial season or even a full season that can be misleading. And DeYoung bottoming out at shortstop last year, I don't know if that's because he's getting near 30, and he legitimately was bad. He was on, that was with the White Sox. Did the White Sox screw him up? Do they know? Do the White Sox know where to position their shortstops? I don't know the answer to these questions. 40 victories would indicate to me that maybe they don't. I can handle DeYoung because he can run into the occasional home run. If he can play shortstop. The key is the guy's got to have a good glove. So that's why I don't know if he's the right guy for that. He would be, if he could play mid or better defense. That's kind of the guy you could have him. You'd be comfortable with him as a backup at third too, in case or for when Royce Lewis doesn't play. So unless you put Lee over there,
or Miranda. I mean, that's the thing is it's so many moving parts that's why. First of all, they already kind of seem to have like this predilection for. If you see a guy you think they're going to sign someone you're not thinking about, and that's going to make sense. I mean, Harrison Bader. At the beginning of this offseason, I probably would not have thought too much about. Danny Coulomb probably would not have thought too much about. We get to this point in the offseason, it's like, that makes sense for what they need and what they're looking for. And there are a number of different players on this list that fit different ways. But unless are they leaning at Jose Miranda playing almost exclusively first base? Is he going to play third and Royce Lewis play some second base? Like, until you know what exactly the organization values, and then how they view guys, and then how they view the external guys like Urias, if they think he can play short, he might be their guy. And again, at the age that he's at, anything can happen. We saw Brandon Drury go off as a minor league free agent a few years ago. Sometimes guys just have a nice little bounce back. And if Urias did that, it would not be shocking at his age and in this spot with the Twins. So I think either he's at the top of the list or did you say IKF or did you like Lopez better?
No, I like IKF better than Lopez. Lopez is down.
I think the Twins like IKF too. They didn't trade for him to trade him specifically.
Right. So I think we've covered the shortstop situation. There are a few other little details here that we'll touch on before moving on to the next portion of our lives in our next show. The Twins released non-roster invitees today. We're going to devote the bulk of another show to that, maybe our next one. But they also announced that Pablo Lopez will be the opening day starting pitcher. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine who else it would be. I mean, you could see Joe Ryan coming off a fully healthy, great season as a possibility, but that's not how he ended up. And Bailey Ober as a guy who maybe someday could be an opening day starter, but Lopez seems like, it's a formality, and there's really nobody else.
You could give Ober an organizational attaboy, but that doesn't really make any sense with Lopez in tow. If for whatever reason Lopez, let's say they wanted to hold him back for a home opener like they did with Brad Radke once or twice, you could do that. But Ober would probably be my second choice, and that's despite the fact that I absolutely love Joe Ryan. I just think coming off an off season and an injury, I mean, not that it matters that much, I guess, either, but it's Pablo for me and then everybody else.
And we also wanted to put a bow on Michael Hellman's time with the Twins. He has gone elsewhere. Do you think that there's potential beyond the usual? The Twins had a player, let him go to somewhere else, and everybody gets worried about what he might become on that other team. Is there regret possibly in our future for not having Michael Hellman work out?
There shouldn't be. It's just he's in the organization at the wrong time. He plays everywhere except really the places the Twins need the most help. I think he'll hit a little bit. I think he could go be the next cog in a rich tradition of Cardinals players who are not super prospects but become pretty nice players. They've had Brendan Donovan. Even I don't think was Tommy Edman a huge prospect? I think he was a pretty good prospect, but like they've had stretches where just guys come out of being average prospects and they have a nice little 4 or 5 year run of league average or better production, playing a couple positions, that sort of thing. They had that one right-handed hitter who, Alan Craig, came out of, I thought, relative obscurity, and
with the
then,
pet tortoise.
and his career obviously went by the wayside quickly. But if the Cardinals usually have those guys internally, if they do that with Hellman, though, I won't be shocked if he's a solid second base, third base, left field type, which you just tip your cap. You say congratulations to him, but you can't keep every single interesting corner utility guy in your organization. You just don't have that luxury with 40-man rosters.
And maybe we'll see Hellman on opening day because the Twins play the Cardinals.
And you'll be there.
And I'll be there. I'm planning on being there.
Yes.
Knock on wood. So
yeah,
we'll get coverage from that. Last thing, Joe Mauer had a Super Bowl commercial.
Yeah.
Sort of. It's for the Unreal line. Of,
as I'm wearing right now.
Oh, how about that? You're prepared for everything, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
It seemed like Joe Mauer got the glamour shots in this commercial, but it was him and John Randall, and there were a couple other Minnesota people that I'm not necessarily familiar with, along with Shooter McGavin, actor Christopher McDonald, who was upset because he hadn't been told about the new line of clothes that was out. So Joe Mauer, does he have a future as an actor? What did you think of his
It's not the best commercial he's ever done. I mean, Head and Shoulders was pretty good. Great, or well played. Mauer was pretty good, but good to see Joe still kicking it a little bit. And Unreal is a local clothing brand. So
St. Paul based, correct?
Yes, national exposure. They've started branching out. Terrific stuff, by the way. Unreal, if you're watching, contact us because we can do some local ads through our network. So I'd love to have Unreal as a sponsor.
I like how you're working all the angles.
Yes.
And that man is Brandon Warren, and I'm Dave Brown, and that's going to wrap up this episode of Locked On Twins, saying we are going to Alexei Casilla
tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night. Did you spit me?
Nope.
Oh,